Lord of the Flies begins with a simple setup, and then it really just, man, it turns into something darker. And so it all starts off with a group of British schoolboys that are stranded on an uninhabited island during a wartime evacuation. And at first, the situation, it kind of starts out like, hey, this is going to be an adventure story, right? This is going to be a Robinson Crusoe kind of deal, right? But no, instead, the author William Golding, who first novel, this was his first novel, he published it in, 1954, and he used that kind of like familiarity, that setup, to ask a more darker question. It's more harsh in its question. It's, that is, what happens when the structures of civilization, they just disappear, and children are left then to govern themselves. And so the novel becomes one of the redefining post-war explorations of civilization and human nature and just savagery. Part of what gives the novel the force behind it is that Golding was writing against a much more optimistic tradition of like island adventure, fiction. The National Library of Scotland notes that Golding was reacting in part to the Coral Island and rejected the idea that stranded boys would naturally behave with, pluck and order and cheerful competence. Instead, Golding, who had himself been a schoolmaster, and he thought that view of children was really badly misshapen. And it really kind of helps to explain why Lord of the Flies feels rather unsettling, because it's not just a survival story. It's instead an argument against these easy assumptions about what innocence is. So at the core of the novel, in the center of the novel, is this struggle over leadership and order and what kind of community the boys are going to build. Now, Ralph, he represents this effort to preserve the rules and cooperation and the hope for rescue. Now, Piggy stands for reason and intelligence and just this authority, this fragile authority of thought. Now, Jack, meanwhile, he becomes the figure through whom power turns towards domination and violence and just weird spectacle. So the novel's conflict isn't just between the individual boys. It's between the ways of organizing human life. And that is one reason why the book stays so teachable. That's why it's a standard within the public school system. Its power happens, the power struggles within it are recognizable almost immediately within the novel. So at the core here, fear is what pushes the island from this, rather uneasy degree of order into a complete and total breakdown. The boys begin to imagine that there is a beast on the island, and that fear becomes more powerful because it is very vague. And so the beast then is just never one thing. It's part rumor, it's kind of a projection, it's kind of a symbol, and then it becomes an excuse. And once the fear takes hold, it becomes easier for Jack to lead through emotion rather than judgment. And the author Golding shows how quickly fear can just make reason kind of dissolve, especially in a group that is, already unstable. One of the novel's most important characters is Simon, and it's because he understands something that the others don't. He begins to get a grasp that the beast is not really just an outside monster waiting in the jungle. He understands that the real threat comes from within the boys, themselves. And so that particular insight is what gives the novel this core of morality, its moral core. And Golding is not saying, hey, civilization is perfect. He's actually saying that without it and without the discipline it imposes, civilization, something dangerous in human beings can come to the surface very quickly. And so if you look at this novel, you can describe it as a means to explore the tension between civilization and savagery. And Simon is like super important, very crucial to that particular insight. So what makes Lord of the Flies endure. What makes it matter is that it's not only about children on an island, it's also a post-war novel. It's written less than a decade after World War I, and it carries that kind of historical pressure within it. And so Golding had served in World War II, and you know, both reference sources and teaching materials, they consistently note that the war shaped his view of human nature. And so when you look deeper into the book, you see that, okay, yeah, the war is definitely there in the background. And so the novel reads like some kind of, small scale experiment. But behind it, there sits this memory of a century, the early 20th century, that had already shown what organized violence could actually look like. Sorry if I'm going to spoil things here, but the ending of the book is the reason why it kind of hangs around with readers, because rescue finally comes. But it does not arrive like as just this grand triumph. Instead, the rescue exposes how far the boys have actually fallen. And so when you have this return of adult authority, it doesn't erase what happened on the island. In fact, it makes the violence and the loss feel even more disturbing as a result. And so Golding refuses to let rescue become this kind of clean moral ending, because the damage has already been done. And that refusal is part of why the novel still feels, kind of like sharp instead of just like, famous, for the ordeals that happen to take place. So what lasts about the Lord of the Flies is not that it's just assigned in schools as a requirement. It lasts because Golding found a way to turn this compact story into this lasting argument about power, leadership, fear, order, violence, and then just like this thinness of civilization. The book is short, right? It's an easy read, but it keeps opening outward into larger questions. And that's why readers will come back to it over time. You may have read it in high school or middle school, and then you may come back to it later in life just to give it a quick read. And what it shows you is that it doesn't offer a comforting view of human beings, but it does offer a view that is, it's rather difficult to forget. Hey, thanks for hanging around for this one, and I appreciate you watching the video.